Hello everyone, I'm Heather, and today we're going to be talking about what is currently the busiest cruise port in North America, and that's Port Canaveral in Florida. Port Canaveral and the Miami cruise ports have kind of gone back and forth for a while, and it might change from one season to the next about which one has more cruise ship departures and more cruise ship passengers going through it. But at the time I'm filming this video, Port Canaveral is in the #1 spot, and Port Canaveral is also where we're taking our next cruise from. So in this video, I'm hoping to answer all your questions about taking a cruise from Port Canaveral. First of all, you'll often see Port Canaveral listed like in parentheses as Orlando. Orlando is the closest major metropolitan area and the closest major airport. However, it is not close to Orlando. As you can see here on this map, it's about a 45-minute drive from the Orlando International Airport to Port Canaveral. So how are you going to get there? You have a lot of options, and it's really going to depend on you and your preferences and how much money you want to spend. I'm going to list what I think are pretty much all of the options, and you can kind of make your own decision. The most expensive option, but one that I know a lot of people do choose, would be to take an Uber or a Lyft. A regular taxi in many cases might actually be a little bit cheaper than Uber or Lyft, but depending on how many people are in your party and how much luggage you have, you might have to pay a little extra to get like a Lyft XL or something like that with a little bit more space in it. But that's definitely probably going to be your most expensive option as far as just going between the airport and the port. There are lots of shuttle services that go from Orlando International Airport to Port Canaveral cruise terminals. One of the most popular is GoPort, and I think they have probably some of the most reasonable rates for shuttle services, so basically bus transportation from Orlando International Airport to Port Canaveral. GoPort is also a partner with Brightline. You cannot take Brightline, the high-speed rail service, to Port Canaveral. The closest it gets you is the Orlando International Airport. It comes up from Miami and Fort Lauderdale, and then it kind of curves over toward Orlando International Airport, and the station is located at Terminal C at the Orlando International Airport. If you do take the Brightline train, either from down the southern part of Florida, or eventually the western side of Florida near Tampa, which is going to extend that way, you still are going to get to the Orlando International Airport. So your options are still going to be the same as if you flew into the airport. But GoPort does advertise that they have a good relationship with Brightline, and so you should be able to, I think you might be able to, even when you book your Brightline tickets, add GoPort shuttle transportation as an option to get you to the port. The cruise lines will probably each offer a transfer service from the airport. Disney Cruise Line is actually pretty famous for having its Disney Cruise Line buses that pick up people both at Orlando International Airport and at Walt Disney World and take them all the way to the cruise terminal for Disney cruises. Disney does have its own designated cruise terminal at Port Canaveral. That's kind of its real home port for a large number of its cruises. We've cruised out of the Disney cruise terminal at Port Canaveral several times. It's a very nice terminal and really starts off your cruise vacation on Disney Cruise Line in a fun way. A shuttle service through the cruise lines is probably going to be pretty pricey, but it might be very convenient for you because you're going to have nice drivers that are going to take care of getting your luggage on and off the bus, and they're going to get you exactly where you need to go right up to your cruise ship and everything like that. And so it is a very convenient option. They'll be waiting for you when you get off the plane with signs. I've also done that with Royal Caribbean before. So if you're the type of traveler who really prefers like being in a group or having somebody else organizing everything for you, then a shuttle through your cruise line is a nice way to go. And then your last option obviously is driving yourself. And that's what we've done a few times in the past and what we're going to be doing this time on our next cruise. You live in Florida or even further away and you've driven yourself all the way to the cruise port, or you've flown into Orlando International Airport and then you've rented a car, which is what's going to be the case for us. If you drive yourself, you have two options for parking at Port Canaveral. The first option, and I'm going to put the Port Canaveral website here for you because you can find information about parking and the prices on that website. But the two options that you have for parking at Port Canaveral are you can park right at the cruise terminal. You cannot book cruise terminal parking in advance. It's basically right now about $17 a day. You just have to show up and see if there's space for you. You cannot get into any cruise terminal parking ramp or parking lot at the cruise terminal before 10 a.m. because they have to give the people getting off the ships a chance to get to their cars and get out of there first. So don't expect to get there before 10 a.m. and be able to park at the cruise terminal. That's one option for you. It is going to be the more expensive option, but it's also going to be the more convenient option because you can actually pull up, offload your luggage, and even your passengers if you want to, and then go park your car and then just walk onto your ship. So, I mean, after you've gone through security and everything, of course. We've done that at the Disney Cruise Terminal. My dad pulled right up to the front door of the cruise terminal, dropped off us and our bags. He went and parked the car in the ramp and then walked back to meet us. So that's a very convenient option, but is going to be more expensive than the second option, which is to park at an off-site cruise terminal parking lot. So the one that we've used is Port Canaveral, and we used that when we went on Harmony of the Seas a couple years ago, and that's what we're going to be using this time. You can pre-book your parking with the off-site lots. So you can book it in advance online. It is also less expensive than parking at the cruise terminal. When I looked for our upcoming cruise, it was about $10 a day. So it's almost half the price of what it is to park at the terminal. We had no problem with it. It worked really great. We left our car there. They have nice big parking lots. They are lots though. They don't have ramps. So your car is going to be sitting out in the elements if that matters to you. But then they help load your luggage onto the little shuttle buses and they drive you right over to your cruise ship. They ask you which ship you're on and they will stop at all of the ships if they need to. And they help you get your luggage off and, tip the driver. Port Canaveral is the closest one to the cruise port. I think there are others farther out. One last option, if you're staying at a hotel in Port Canaveral, which we are, you do also have the option to do a park and cruise with the hotel. So I'm not sure if that's associated with one of the other pre-booked off-site lots or not, but I'm not exactly sure how that works. If anybody's done it, leave it in the comments below. But last time when we stayed at the Hampton Inn, which is combined with a Hampton Inn and a Home2 Suites in the same building, there was a big banner in the lobby advertising for this park and cruise service. So then you're going to be paying it right through your hotel. You're going to be paying for your hotel room and the privilege of leaving your car in the hotel's parking lot for the duration of your cruise. And the price of that obviously is going to depend on how long you're leaving your car there and what the price of your hotel room is that night. But it'll be right in your hotel rate and you'll be paying it directly through the hotel. So that's another option too if you'd rather leave your car at the hotel. That might especially be a good option if you plan on using the hotel again after the cruise. Okay, what's there to do in Port Canaveral? The town or the area itself is kind of a lot of hotels and a whole bunch of people fishing. There's a lot of maritime nautical stuff going on in that area because of the port there. One thing that I really, really enjoyed at Port Canaveral, and I was so sad when I looked it up, I was going to check the hours and the stuff for you before I made this video, is the Exploration Tower. The Exploration Tower, which we filmed pretty extensively in our videos before Harmony of the Seas because we went there twice. We went there the day before our cruise and we went there the morning of our cruise. You'll see it, it's a big tall building and it was designed to look like a sail. And it was really cool. It had a whole bunch of stuff in it when it was first opened, but it was kind of a shell of itself when we were there in 2022. And we thought that was only because of the pandemic. I was hopeful that's the only reason it was. We were still able to go up to the top for free and go on the observation deck, which was really cool. And you can see all of the ships from up there that are in port. And it was really nice because there's no other place in Port Canaveral. Port Canaveral in Florida is very flat. And there's nowhere else around there where you can see the ships from up high. And so I really enjoyed that and liked getting to see what all ships were in port in one big view. But I read that apparently shortly after we were there, it closed permanently. So the exploration tower is closed. So I'm really sorry that those of you who are going on a cruise in the future are not going to be able to get to experience that. I really hope somebody else buys it or something and they reopen it, but I guess it never made any money, so that's too bad. The other way that you can kind of do some ship spotting when you're in Port Canaveral, other than as you're driving there and you're going over the causeway bridges, you can kind of see the tops of the cruise ships as you're arriving, is to go to Jetty Park. And I'll put the website here for Jetty Park. You do have to have a day pass for Jetty Park. There is a campground there, and there is a beach there, and there are lifeguards there during the day, like from 9 to 5 or 10 to 5, something like that. So you can go to the beach there, you can camp there, and then you can get a day pass there. There's also annual passes you'll see here for both Brevard County residents and people who live elsewhere. And there's also military pricing too. So you can go there, and that's a really cool place to watch the cruise ships go out, because they go right past it as they're leaving Port Canaveral to go out to sea. If you look at a timetable for cruise ships for ports, you'll see that most of them will leave probably around 3, 4, or 5 o'clock in the afternoon. So you would want to time your time if you want to see the ships go past to be around that time so you can see them up. You can see them really up close. Otherwise, just spending the day at Jetty Park going to the beach or something is a fun recreational activity too. You probably would not want to be there to see the ships come into port, because if you're not aware of this, if you've never cruised before, ships arrive at their home port for disembarkation at the end of a cruise very, very early in the morning. So it's still going to be dark. They're going to get there before the sun is up, because they've got to turn over that whole ship and get it ready for the next cruise. So you probably don't want to be, I don't know, unless you like sitting there in the dark to see the ships come in with their lights on. That could be something. I know in Miami, there are some nice hotels where you can get a good view from up high of the ships coming in and going out of Miami cruise port, and that can be pretty cool. But the other thing that I would recommend as an activity right at or near Port Canaveral is Cape Canaveral. Cape Canaveral and the Kennedy Space Center. We have never done this, and we keep meaning to do it, but every time we talk about it, we always end up getting the Disney pull. We're such big Disney fans, and it just, for us, it seems like a waste of a plane ticket to fly to Orlando and not also go to Disney. The Kennedy Space Center is supposedly really cool and very well done. So we do want to get there eventually. The Tim Tracker has done quite a few videos at the Kennedy Space Center. So if you're more interested in seeing more details about it, I would check out the videos on his channel. It is $75 per person for a ticket for a day pass at Kennedy Space Center. But apparently there's so much to do there. Oftentimes people wish they had more than one day. And I think there actually is a ticket option where you can go for 2 days in a row. So that's something to consider too, that you might want to stretch it out. There are also options on most cruise lines, including our upcoming cruise, to tack on Kennedy Space Center after your cruise as a shore excursion. And so what that means is that you'll get off your ship, you'll get on a bus, they'll take you to Kennedy Space Center and get you in. And then at the end, they'll pick you up again and take you to the airport for your flight home. You would obviously have to have a pretty late flight in the day or a subsequent day if you're going to do that. But I will tell you, it's much more expensive to do that as a shore excursion than it is to just buy the tickets yourself. And you can buy the tickets yourself online at the Kennedy Space Center website before you go, so you already have them. And then you'd have the option of either doing it before your cruise or after your cruise. That brings me to a very important point. Because Port Canaveral Cruise Port is located a good distance away from the Orlando International Airport, it is especially important that you allow more than enough time to get between the airport and the cruise terminal. This would be one of those times where I definitely would not advise people to risk flying in the same day as their cruise. This is going to be especially important as Disney just announced that they are going to be moving the all aboard time for their Disney cruises out of Port Canaveral and Fort Lauderdale up an hour. So instead of having to be on board by 4, you have to be on board by 3. And if you come after 3 o'clock, you will be denied boarding. So that's going to cut it really close if you've got to fly down on the same day. I do not advise doing that. I really think it's very important if you're taking a cruise out of Orlando and you're flying, that you fly in the day before at least, because it's a good distance and a lot of things could go wrong in that process of getting from Orlando International Airport to the cruise port. So I really strongly advise people to get in early if they're going to be cruising out of Port Canaveral. Then when you're going back, if you have a flight home that day, you want to make it as late as possible. Not as late as possible, like, 10 o'clock at night or anything. That's not necessary. But you definitely don't want a flight before noon. So I would say sometime between like 1 and 4 or 5 p.m. is probably pretty safe. Because not only do you have to account for the disembarkation process, but you've got to account for the fact that you have to somehow get back to the airport, maybe return a rental car, which will take a little bit of time. And Orlando International Airport is notoriously busy. And it's especially busy in their security area. Their security lines are usually very long. And on a cruise disembarkation day, especially Fridays, Saturdays, Sundays, are going to be really busy because of all the people getting off the cruise ships. So keep that in mind and allow yourself plenty of time after your cruise to get to the airport before your return flight. Make sure you have a good cushion in there. You want to have at least that 2 hours between when you arrive at the airport and when your flight takes off. At least. That's a minimum. And then the last thing I want to talk about, which I already kind of hinted to, is a lot of people do consider combining a theme park vacation with their cruise vacation out of Port Canaveral because they're so close together. I do also want to add that you could also cruise out of Tampa and add Walt Disney World to your trip, because it's actually a little bit closer, I think, from Walt Disney World to the Tampa cruise port than it is to Port Canaveral. Look at the map here and you'll see Disney World is in the opposite direction from Orlando International Airport as the cruise port is. So the airport is in the middle, Walt Disney World is to the west, and Port Canaveral is on the coast to the east. You have to go back past the airport, if you're going between the two. So keep that in mind too. It's about an hour or more, I would say, from Walt Disney World to Port Canaveral, and that's definitely going to depend on traffic. If you are staying on site at Walt Disney World, either before or after your cruise, Walt Disney World cruise transportation, the buses that look like cruise ships on the side, you can add that onto your vacation and they will provide the transportation for you between airport, Walt Disney World, the port, back to the airport, the port to Walt Disney World. Any of those combinations, you can add that onto your vacation package if you're combining a Walt Disney World stay and a cruise package. I don't know anything about Universal Studios. Does anybody know? Does Universal Studios have any kind of airport to Universal shuttles? Or do they have any kind of, I don't know why they'd have anything with the cruise port, because Universal Studios doesn't have any kind of relationship with any cruise line or anything. So yeah, you'd still have to go back to the airport if you were doing Universal and then go from there to get to the port. If you were going to combine a Disney World stay and a cruise, and it doesn't have to be a Disney cruise, but keep in mind, because like we're doing this, we're doing a Walt Disney World stay and then we're doing a cruise on Royal Caribbean. So we wouldn't be able to use the cruise transportation to get to the port because we're not booked on a Disney cruise. But that doesn't matter for us because we're renting a car anyway. But if you're trying to decide between which one to do first, I would recommend doing Walt Disney World first or Universal Studios first. Any theme park part of your trip, I would do that first, and I would do the cruise second. And the reason I say that is because the theme park stuff is exhausting. You do a lot of walking. It's very tiring. You almost need a vacation from your vacation. And so it's very nice to have a cruise to go to after your theme park vacation, because that's much more relaxing and it's going to be a slower pace and things like that. So that's how I would do it, and that's what I would recommend. But I'd be curious to hear in the comments if anybody's done it the other way around. I have actually done that too. In California last year, we went on a Royal Caribbean cruise on Navigator of the Seas, and after our cruise, we went to Disneyland. And that actually was really fun too, because you get really sad at the end of a cruise. You're like, oh, my cruise is over and I have to go home. By the way, quick tip for you. The remedy for post-cruise blues is to make sure you have another cruise booked before you get off your cruise. So always have the next cruise booked, and then that helps defeat some of that sadness that you feel when you get off your cruise. But anyway, it was really fun to get off the ship, even though we were sad the cruise was over, and go, oh wait, we're going to Disneyland. Yay! So to have something like that to look forward to at the end of your cruise can also be a really good thing. So it could go either way. It's definitely up to you what your preference is. But that was fun too, to say, you know, oh, we don't have to fly home yet. We're going to Disneyland first. So that was nice. Two other quick things before I end the video. One is, here is a lovely handy guide that shows all of the ships that are in Port Canaveral. You can probably find this for every cruise port in the world, honestly, if you look. And there's another website, which I will put the website down below when I find it. I can't remember it off the top of my head right now. That is really handy. I talked about this briefly in the video where I talked about why we canceled our Thrill Water Park tickets, Perfect Day at Coco Cay, when you want to check what other ships are in port with you. But this one here that I'm putting on the screen shows you all the times of ships coming in and out of Port Canaveral. So that can be really helpful if you want to like go to Jetty Park one day, even if you're not going on a cruise, just to watch the cruise ships go in and out to see what's there. And then the last thing I wanted to mention was, it can be really cool if your cruise or your visit to Port Canaveral is timed with a SpaceX launch. They launch off the rockets for SpaceX right there all the time. I mean, back in the day, they also used to launch off Mercury missions and the Gemini missions and the Apollo missions and the Space Shuttle, all launched off from Port Canaveral. So nowadays it's SpaceX. They're launching stuff off all the time. And so it can be really cool if you happen to be there for a rocket launch. You can see those from some distance away. I have actually even seen one from a ship. That can be pretty cool too if you want to check into the timing of the SpaceX launches and see if there might be one happening while you're in Port Canaveral. I hope this answered your questions about Port Canaveral. If you have any more, please leave them in the comments below. Thank you for taking the time to watch this video. Have a great day and safe travels.